of dollars in grants in order to help many organizations adopt. So it's not just into the wild. There is a community there that's being funded to deploy and expose the possibilities. And then there's the next level of people driving adoption beyond this initial first moving.
I guess when I was thinking about certified, it would be very easy to copy these badges or create these badges. So the whole learning thing for those that are really going through the process is great. But those that are copying and pasting, what kind of, and I know that this is, you're thinking about this.
So some of that is actually taken care of by the badge itself, because we don't host the badge images themselves. We actually create the backpack that where the badges live, but the issuers themselves actually host the criteria URL. So they're hosting the content that when it gets clicked on and someone says, like, what is the content associated with this badge, it goes back to the issuer. If there's no correlation between the issuer and what that badge says it is, then you can pretty much ignore that.
Okay, that's what I was thinking in terms of.
So this is sort of like in a high school diploma. The employer can call the school, verify that it's not just a photocopy of the diploma, it is in fact an actual diploma. So you need the person that issued to be able to confirm in some way that they actually issued that badge specifically to that person. So there's a number of different components. They're claiming one kind of diploma and they really got another. They didn't get any sort of diploma at all. All of those sorts of things have to be resolved. Not all of these things are ironed out. We have some different opinions about how to iron those things out. But they are being deployed, right? People are solving these problems and actively engaged in these questions. That's exactly right.
Carla, I was just going to ask you, is this largely conceptual at this point? Or are there school districts who have utilized these badges as a major activity of the district?
So, no, it's actually, so we started in 2010. We released beta in April of this year. We're going for 1.0 at the end of this year, so at the beginning of next year, depending on how fast our developers are working. And there are organizations, so Steve kind of alluded to this a little earlier. MacArthur actually funds a competition called the Digital Media and Learning Competition. Is everybody familiar with that? Mostly, yeah. Okay, so this past year it was focused on badges for lifelong learning. Again, that's the sense of lifelong learning, is that people don't stop learning the minute they walk out of a four-year accredited institution. And so they actually worked with a series of collaborators, and I was very closely involved in that aspect. And a series of collaborators, including NASA and including Disney, Pixar, and Microsoft. And there's one of the DML winners is actually the Philadelphia School District. So there are people right now, as Steve mentioned, working on developing this and implementing it. The competition winners actually have 1 full year in order to plug into the OBI and have fully functioning badge systems by 2013, depending on when their funding comes through, but ultimately probably like around March, April. And they're fairly far along. So I was just at another conference, and the people who are working on that specific badge system, they're cranking. And it's actually fairly easy to plug into the OBI. It's not a simple proposition if you do not have developers, I will say that. But we are working on that aspect as well to make sure that anyone will be able to issue badges. So we're trying to develop an end-to-end solution. Initially, we had focused very heavily on developing the infrastructure itself, making sure that like the roads and pathways were there, and now we're trying to make sure that if someone wants to issue a badge, they can issue a badge. If someone wants to display a badge, they can display a badge. So it is actually up and coming. There are lots of organizations. There were 90 overall competitors. There are 30 funded winners and 60 unfunded winners. That's how we refer to them. And they were all winners. Seriously, if you got to stage 3, you deserve something. And so there are currently lots of people plugging in. There are also people outside of that who are have been involved since the beginning who are plugging in as well. We have been kind of surprised that there's been a huge uptake in the academic world, probably a little bit more than we had anticipated. But other organizations are like the Manufacturing Institute. So we're trying to make sure that the conversation is not just kind of specifically focused around academia, but is also kind of intentionally focused around employers. So trying to make sure that there's a conversation that occurs both ways, directly from people who are learning and earning badges, and also organizations who may be hiring specifically from badges. Any other questions?
are you working with the consortiums at all?
Raise the top assessment.
I see this as a wonderful thing that could be in the digital library as formative tools and processes and linked with your work and
So
navigating.
I've been engaging with both Park and SBAC on questions of how to issue this. To be honest, they understand the value, but the intellectual bandwidth isn't there right now. They've got much more tangible problems, and I agree with them. So as we think about, we should issue badges, we should make an assessment that works first.
Yeah.
Right? We should figure out about technology and how states are going to afford it, right? So there's a bunch of things that they got to get to first, and so it's just a pause, is what I would say in the conversation. This is clearly directly connected.
They're just starting with the formative tools and processes.
And try not to think about that. I mean, that they've just started. But no, you're right. The formative stuff in particular offers huge amounts of opportunity to connect different providers of formative learning back to each other because they can all read the same badges. And this raises a question of, is this a full transcript, or is this just components, or is this bigger than it? What is it that we're talking about here? And that's not a limitation of badges. That's just a limitation of what we decide to do with them if we want to go down this road. And how do we want to structure them and make them visible? So some hard questions there, but yeah, you're right.
Well, and there's two distinct different pieces because your piece, well, maybe you're working together, but could fit into the digital library. Something
So now you're asking about the learning registry?
Yes.
Oh, yes. So the learning registry
And
is
then
something.
you could move into the badges.
Exactly. That's my theory. Right, exactly. Learning registry is a fundamental piece of infrastructure. They don't know that, but that's my theory.
Well, we're seeing it.
Okay, yeah, so there's this notion of information moving around, formative assessments. I've got an assessment item in Kansas, and it turns out that it's Common Core aligned, and I want that assessment item over here. Perfect, right? That's exactly what the learning registry is for. Then I went through the 16 interim assessment items, and I'm now ready to move on, right? Could be a badge, right? That's a very appealing integration.
I like to say they breathe the same air.
Yeah.
A lot of the same values in the projects. Open, no intermediaries, right? You want to deploy it, it's free, right? This is not designed with commercial interests at heart. This is designed to be useful, right, to the people that want to issue them and want to consume them, whether they be commercial or otherwise.
Okay, so getting back to this is kind of the overall ecosystem, actually, as we see it. And you'll notice that I highlighted in the middle is their earners, and that's really because that's the primary distinguishing factor, is that we want earners to control their data. So issuers and endorsers on one side, displayers are on the other, and the person who actually owns that data, that gets to make conscious decisions about privacy, is in the middle. And then just extending that, so again, there's Gladys kind of in the middle of all this, making these decisions about where to earn badges and also then how to display those badges.
This is an important point, which is, it's not a question of I either make that badge available to everyone or I don't. There's nuances here, which is, I will make this a badge available to my friends on Facebook. So if you're not a friend on Facebook, you can't see it. That's a possibility. I will make this badge directly available to one particular college or university or something like that. They might share it with others, but I just made it available to them. I didn't make it available to everybody. So there's nuances. And this badge, I want the world to know that I have this badge and I want everyone to see it. So there's different levels of what the person who earns the badge can do with it. It doesn't just involve I keep it secret from everyone or I make it available for everybody. That's fair.
Yeah, I thought I said that. It's good to have it repeated. Definitely about moving on to the badge metadata spec. So essentially, this is content associated that's embedded within the badges, and it's really hard to read, but it's essentially about who the issuer is,